Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Between the Lines. My name is John Lofton here. Oh, man, I wish I had a co-host today, but I do not. That is why you're seeing this screen appear, which I thought I had hidden earlier. Oh, well. Life goes on. But anyway, we are doing the show here, and I'm really excited to have you guys here. I think we're going to have a good show. This is like our third beta test kind of doing this whole thing. But you know, I think we're gonna have a good show. I miss this. I was supposed to have a co-host today. Unfortunately, he is out sick. Kurt, if you're watching, hope you get better, buddy. We'll hopefully see you next week. So what we're doing here today is our weekly show, brand new show. We're still kind of in beta, which is why it's still on the Lofton Space YouTube channel for the moment, and not and it is not going to be on. There we go. Wanted to get rid of that comment screen just because I'm doing this a little differently today to try to even out the stream, but that also means the integrations for the on-screen comments and all that are not going to work right now. But I will be able to see them. I can bounce back and forth between Facebook and YouTube's streams. So feel free to comment and ask questions today. As the title suggests, we are going to be talking about coronavirus today. And in regards to coronavirus, we're also going to be basically going over just kind of a story, like how do we meet in the middle? Because, you know, an illness that has affected so many people has gotten so polarized and politicized, even as such with this whole new $2 trillion COVID relief package that was very much agreed to on party lines, because there was one extra person in the Senate who wanted it and the other person didn't. I mean, that's how divisive this issue and these relief strategies and these talks have gone. And do I think that there's a compromise still? Absolutely. Am I a politician who can actually say that? No. I'm just the average schmuck who watches TV just like everybody else. So that's kind of the point here. And I'm hoping today we have less technical difficulties. So we're going to dive into this. But here's how the show works. So I usually start out, I'm going to tell a story, usually from my childhood or something happened, you know, at any point in my life, or even if I know of somebody else in my life who has had, you know, a similar situation, and, you know, they're okay with me telling their story, then I'm going to be talking about that. And so then I'm going to relate it to what my opinion is so that you guys have an idea, you know, where I'm coming from, why I'm thinking the way that I am thinking, and how I got there. And so that's kind of the whole premise for this whole thing. Because even at the end of the day, if you guys don't agree with me or what I'm saying, at least you know where I'm coming from. At least you can see my train of thought. And I think if we can start to understand each other and the way that each other thinks, because it's different. We all think differently. We all have our own kind of priorities, ideas, and mindsets. So the best way we can kind of come together is if we actually talk and we actually listen then to the other person. And we don't immediately judge them because they have an opinion, even if we believe very strongly about it. Because, for instance, you know, the mask mandate on the COVID-19. A lot of people wanted it. A lot of people were going crazy about it. And the latest trend was like the doubling up of your mask, which I guess helps. I mean, they say it helps, but I mean, at that point, how many more layers do you want to put on yourself before you start suffocating? And I'm not saying that you shouldn't wear a mask at all. I'm just saying, like, you know, do you need 3-4 masks on, layers? Yeah, the big thing at the beginning of the pandemic, if you all remember, was the N95. And now they're like, oh, you can just wear these cloth masks. And they're good. They're good enough. And then, but yeah, everybody at the beginning wanted these N95 masks because they thought that was the only thing that was going to protect them. But the problem is it was taken away from the healthcare workers who were actually treating patients with COVID-19. And the scary thing is, just like anything new in our world, if we don't understand it, it's scary, right? If we don't know what it will do and how it will affect us, it scares us. And what do? As the larger majority of people, we tend to look at, you know, our officials to protect us, to guide us, even though there are other people who also think that I can take care of myself, you know? Whatever happens, happens. And if you're like me, I think, I want to take it seriously. I understand. As someone who had COVID-19, my wife had it as well. We understand that it is serious and it made us sick. It made me, not want to get out of bed a few of those days. I really struggled. I had the fever, the chills, the body aches. It was nasty, but I mean, I don't think it was for me any worse than the flu. Now, obviously, people have died from this thing. In Iowa alone, we have, it's got to be getting close to 6,000. I think it was like 5,500 last I had heard a few days ago. People who have died in Iowa from COVID-19. And it's terrible. And I don't wish it upon anybody. And I feel bad for your family if you have gone through this or if you've lost a loved one to this virus. It's certainly an unforgiving, virus. But just the same, we've lost a lot of other people to a lot of very serious medical illnesses. And that's kind of where I'm coming from on this is while it's very tragic when we lose people, especially to something that's new and we wouldn't think should be a problem because it wasn't a problem last year. Why is it a problem now? Now I, just lost a loved one or multiple loved ones in some cases. And now I'm panicking because now I think this is like the end of the world. I panic, right? So this is kind of going into what I wanted to talk about, my story. So when I was a little kid, I was probably about 6, 7. Yeah, let's go with that. About 6, 7. If you guys remember these, if this was a thing where you guys were from, but when I was growing up down near Memphis, Tennessee, and actually more or less, south of Memphis in Mississippi, just on the other side, near Hernando, Mississippi, if you guys know where that is. Shout out if you do. I grew up kind of with my grandpa, and they had, a decent sized acreage and big, huge yard and everything like that. And then they moved and eventually moved to the city because they all got developed. But anyway, back then, we all would still go to my grandpa's house. And I remember one day, actually it wasn't at my grandpa's, it was actually at one of my aunt and uncle's places. Chicken pox was going around, and my cousin just so happened to have chicken pox. And I remember my mom saying, "Hey, go give your cousin a big hug, or even give him a kiss." Because I didn't know it at the time. I was still too little, but my mom intentionally wanted to get me chicken pox. Because at that time, it was believed, you're better off getting it now as a kid versus waiting until you're an adult and you get it way worse. Because everybody knows if you get chickenpox as an adult, it's way worse. We didn't understand shingles, I don't think maybe as well as we do now back then. But that's kind of what happened. It was just better to get it done and over with and move on. And, now I think we even have a chickenpox vaccine. My wife is here, but she says she doesn't want to go on camera. Otherwise, I'd ask her if she knows if there's actually a chickenpox vaccine. I know there's a shingles vaccine. Oh, man. I didn't think about that. But anyway, but at the time, it was one of those things. And now we know that if you had the chickenpox, you can get shingles later on in life. And they are like hell on earth. They're terrible. And, you really don't want to have them if you don't actually need them. So, you don't need them. No one ever needs them, but you get what I'm saying. Like it's one of those things you really don't want to have it happen if you don't need it to. Okay, cool. Hey Meg, thanks for the shout out. Sorry, I was looking over there and I happened to peek over at Facebook and saw a comment from actually being my stepmom. And so, hey, just a shout out to her. So yeah, feel free to comment, guys, and like and subscribe and share this video, because the whole idea with this beta video is before we launch it big and do this whole like marketing thing, I'm just trying to get my feet wet here and figure out what you guys like and what you don't like about the show and any issues or anything like that. So please use the comment section. I will read them. If I don't get to them in the live show, I will get to them. Okay, so anyway, so I got the chickenpox, and funny story about that. I got them in a very bad spot. I didn't get them on my chest. I didn't even get them on my back. I didn't get them on my legs or my head nor my hands. I got them on my butt. I remember so well. My mom just like, don't scratch it, you'll pop them or you'll get, sores. But I wanted to scratch my butt like there was no tomorrow. I got it so bad on my butt. All of those little itchy red bumps. I don't remember having a fever too bad. I think my mom told me I did get a fever, but it wasn't, super significant. It wasn't, really bad. Not as bad as it could have been, but it was on my butt. So I'm walking around all day scratching my butt, that sort of thing. And, but I got over it. It sucked for a little while, but I got over it. And now I guess I hope I don't get shingles in my lifetime. I know it's possible now. I know my mom didn't know about that at the time. Maybe she wouldn't have had it. But at the time, like I said, it was believed that if you didn't get it then, you would get it worse later on in life as an adult. And so I guess that's the way I've always looked at everything. From that disease on, it's like every sinus infection, every ear infection, every flu, every stomach bug, every time I would just throw up violently. And this is coming from, you guys need to know this, like I've had 2 big bouts of colitis as well as E. coli poisoning that actually put me in the hospital for 4 days about almost 2 years ago. And that was the worst, 2 weeks of my life. As far as anything medical I've ever had, every surgery I've ever had pales in comparison to the pain, to the just suffering that I went through. And it sucked. There was a point in the hospital I thought, oh man, this is actually serious. This is it's got me a little worried now. What's gonna happen here? And I saw in the diagnosis that I had sepsis and all that. They never said sepsis to me, and I didn't even notice. But you think about someone who goes into sepsis and then septic shock, where there's so much virus in bacteria and all that in you, and your body just cannot do it on its own. I do remember an entire day of nothing but IV drips of antibiotics. I remember that very well, and it sucked. It was the worst time. And so for a lot of people, I know that COVID probably feels just like that. It's the worst thing you've ever had to go through in your entire life. And it stinks. But if you got it already and you're over it, I don't know about you guys, but I felt a sense of relief, right? Once I knew I was getting over the hurdle, coming down, and I was starting to feel more normal. I was starting to feel more like myself. I was feeling okay. I had energy. I could get up and go do things. My fever wasn't keeping me awake all night, shivering and shaking and cramping up and just this pain. Once I can get over that and I was starting to see it, I was like, because I knew that at this point I had some immunity now. This was it. This was the worst it was going to get for me. And it was such a relief just to have it over. Am I insinuating here that everybody should get COVID and we should all just get over it, done and over with and all that? No, absolutely not. I hope that everybody can avoid COVID and get over this, this virus, because it is terrible. But what I will also say is I think there's worse things in life. I do. I think that COVID-19, for the large part, probably has been made maybe a little bit worse than it should have been. And I don't even know what the reasonings for why this would be made worse than it should have been. Because it went from everybody denying it or everybody thinking that it would just go away, and it didn't. And we kept seeing new cases and new cases. And then the entire medical field just got on board and just said, you know what, we're going to find a vaccine. We're going to kill this thing. I wish we could do that with cancer. How many times has cancer gotten in the way? Cancer took my mom. My mom died from pancreatic cancer back in 2015. I would have loved it if they treated pancreatic cancer the same way that they treated COVID-19. We still don't have a cure for it. We have treatments. And even at the beginning of this pandemic, we had therapeutics. There were things that they were trying that were thought to help. Remember the whole thing about remdesivir? Yeah. So That's my point. I wish that if we cared so much about COVID, we should care enough about other things and illnesses that generally are taking people's lives and there's not a cure for. Even what I have with Alport syndrome as a kidney disease, now while it's probably not fatal, it is leading me to end-stage renal disease as we speak. I'm on dialysis right now as we speak. I will not live a long time without dialysis and eventually a kidney transplant. Why can we not find cures for stuff like this? Oh, and by the way, Alport syndrome is a multi-generational disease, meaning I can give it to my kid can give it to his kid, and so on and so forth. Will every one of our kids have it? No. It's always a 50-50 shot. But it just, I wish that we could not take all the focus away from COVID, but I wish we could take enough of it away as a lesson so that we can teach others how to prioritize things and put a focus on other diseases, other illnesses, and issues affecting our world. But what's happened now is, it got made into this thing and it became an economic issue. It became a political issue. It became a, frankly, manners issue, because we can touch back on the mask mandate, for example. I have a lot of people in my family, both sides, who are on both sides of the fence on this. I have some family that says, big deal, so what? You got the flu, you got COVID. I'm sorry if you're in the hospital. I'm sorry about this, but I don't want to wear a mask. It's my choice. That's what they would say. And frankly, in a lot of ways, I agree with that. I have other people who say, well, they can't even keep us socially distant at work. We have to wear masks and all that, but they can't keep us 6 feet apart. And I'm like, stand in the line at Walmart and tell me if you can actually measure 6 feet apart from you and the next person. Like, it's not realistic to stay socially distant at all times, every second. They've even developed these devices that'll buzz at you if you get within 6 feet of another person. And I think it's ridiculous. I just can't get behind it. If you have to be around other people and socialize, then you're going to socialize. When a year ago, or more than a year ago now, before all this happened, if you had a cold, did you call in sick to work? No. Now, if you call in, you tell your boss, hey, boss, my throat hurts and I got a runny nose. Your boss is probably going to say, if they're anything like my boss, they're probably going to say, oh, well, now you got to go get a COVID test and you got to wait so many days until your symptoms stop. And I don't know how they paid people for all this time to miss work, but it's mandated. You got to stay home, even if it turns out you just had a cold, but they were COVID-like symptoms. It's gotten so fearful that we can't allow people to make smart decisions for themselves. I know for a lot of people it feels like the cold, and I realize that a cold for you could be a death sentence if you gave it to somebody else. I understand that the virus load and impact on everybody is going to be different because everybody's immune system is, tuned differently. So what's the happy medium here? Where am I getting at with all of this? Like, back and forth, agree, not agree, which side am I really on? Well, I wanted to do a little research, and the best way I could think about doing this research is, instead of thinking about individual people, I kind of thought most of our geographic regions in the United States, you could probably make some stereotypes and some pretty well adequate stereotypes as to, how a state would respond. You would probably think Mississippi responds different to things like this than California and New York does. I'm just throwing that out there. I'm pretty sure that's what happened. And you can find it in the news too. I mean, just recently I saw in the news, Texas and Mississippi pretty much lifting all restrictions, right? Well, California and, I think even Iowa, we still have a few, They've lifted the mask mandate, but pretty much like if you're in like the Des Moines area, you're still required to because the local jurisdiction has said that you got to wear a mask. And honestly, businesses, just like the signs that say no shoes, no shirt, no service, I like coming the same as like putting socks on in the morning practically for some people. I know for me, I've got at least 15 of them. because, well, where I work, I'm required to wear a mask. It's just one of those things. I guess you get used to it after doing it for almost a year. But so here's what I wanted to do. I took an article here from Politico. Don't know how you guys feel about that, but I don't know. It was interesting to me because they made it very clear. And before I switch over here and actually talk about what you're seeing on your screen here, I'm going to switch mics here, so it's probably going to sound a little bit different, but this will make it easy for me to read along with you guys and get a little closer to the screen just because of my bad eyesight. So here we go. All right. So you guys should be able to hear me pretty well now. And I'm going to move this guy aside. Make sure it's still coming over to you guys here before we get going. Make sure that still works. Yep, looks like it's good. All right. So moving over here to our map here. So like I said, this is how states responding to coronavirus in 7 steps. So this this article may be a bit outdated. I know it's not exact, but I thought this was kind of interesting. So this is like talking about bars and restaurants. So if we hover over California, they say closed except for takeout and delivery. Okay. Iowa says closed for takeout and delivery. That is not true. I know for a fact that Iowa, you can go into a restaurant right now today. So I know that this is old, but this is probably in the height of the pandemic. And the Mississippi is like non-applicable. So this is like, and Nebraska did this on a county level, so that's why that's all like looking interesting. And so, but most states pretty much were shut down to bars and restaurants at one point. That was like a common thing, because if we limit our social gatherings even for a little while, it's supposed to quote unquote flatten the curve. So pretty much every state got on board with that. A large majority of states got on with that. Look at that. It's pretty much all blue. But we come over here to the vaccine. So when the vaccine's available, who's going to pay for it? Large places are saying pretty much, your insurance, or a state-funded reimbursement insurance kind of thing. But there's not really a charge for it. A few states like Louisiana, which is interesting because, Louisiana being a southern state, has actually a heavy demographic. I think that's based on ethnicity, just given the population that lives in Louisiana. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's kind of where we're getting at with why they have some restrictions. But then you look at Mississippi and all that, and they're not even, and all that, Alabama, and they're not reporting. Although you look at Kentucky, I know for a fact, from an economic standpoint, Kentucky and Arkansas are not rich states. And so that's probably a large portion of that. The large gathering ban, Iowa had a limit on there. Some places have put it so that it's just different random restrictions because everybody kind of had their own thing. So I'm just trying to take a look at like Texas. Like Texas and Iowa, we had it where you couldn't gather with more than 10 people. Now that that's lifted, like I said, this is an old map. But I thought it was kind of interesting. And then you could see, Mississippi not applicable. I don't think Mississippi ever did that. And I'm focusing on California and Mississippi. Why? Because this is where I was able to get the most research. And I felt that these would show the stark contrast between one side of the country and another, and also where, politically, a large portion of our divide happens. Obviously California is very much a liberal state. They lean more Democrat, and Mississippi is, to say they're Republican is probably an understatement. And Iowa's heavy Republican too. So the mandatory quarantine thing, this was interesting. Of course, if you went to California, New York, or New Jersey, it was a statewide quarantine type thing. Iowa did not have one. Louisiana did have a statewide quarantine thing. Florida did, high-risk groups, and I know there was an outbreak there. And I'm getting to what I'm showing these maps for us. Non-essential business closures and all that made everybody stay home. You can go on here, by the way. This is just Politico. You have to kind of search for it, I guess, a little bit. And then pretty much everybody closed school except, Iowa did
have a restriction where you had to have a 15% or more positivity rate before a school could apply for a waiver to go online only. California had pretty much effectively closed. Everybody's closed. Um, and that was generally the state for most everybody. Only a few states didn't, close schools all the way down. And so what I'm getting with all of this, and I'm gonna just jump back over here, is when we're looking at how each place responded. What we're really doing is trying to see like the averages of what was like the medium state. What did everybody tend to agree on should happen? Everybody agreed to some level masks are a good idea. Everybody tended to agree with that. And I'm going to elaborate some more here. I'm going to pull this guy back over here because I sound better. I probably sound like I'm talking in a telephone when I'm on this one. This is like a backup mic and also good for that side screen so I can get closer and it's easier for me to read. So bear with me 1 second here and we'll switch over.
There we go. All right. So now we're back on to our primary mic here. I like this one better this year, SM7B. If anyone's got one of these, let me know. But you could probably hear it sounds a whole lot better when I'm talking on this mic. But I think that masks are a good idea. Do I support a mask mandate? No. Do I think we should have some benefits if you choose to wear a mask versus if you didn't wear a mask? Sure. If you don't wear a mask, maybe you don't get to be in groups larger more than 10. I don't know. Maybe we shouldn't do that. I really don't, even in my own mind, I'm really not sure. Because again, until this point, we never made a big deal out of getting what essentially looks like a flu. And I'm not a medical expert either, but the symptoms are just like the flu. I know that more people have died here, but we've also been tracking COVID-19. Probably, I think more, if I'm saying it from an opinionated standpoint, probably more than we track the flu every year. I know it gets tracked to some extent, but I mean, everything got tracked with COVID-19. And so I think that's kind of where we're seeing some of those numbers too. I also know from a good friend of mine who I would use as a trusted source that their understanding was originally, now they're calculating them differently, but at the time, let's say you were hospitalized for COVID-19. Your test came back and you were positive for COVID-19. For a while, I think there was the rule that you had to have at least 2 negative tests before you could be released from the hospital. At least that's the way it was early on. It may not be that way now. It may still be. I'm not sure. But I do know that each one of the tests that you were given, if they were positive, it didn't count as the second one. But if you had a positive and then a negative, and then had a positive again, it was 2 separate cases. Even though you're the same person dealing with the same virus, it actually got counted as 2 cases. And so it kind of skews the numbers a little bit. And I, like I said, I would take that as a trusted source and, firsthand knowledge. But it's still just kind of, it is hard to believe the numbers that we've seen with COVID. It really is. And so, I think that, excuse me here. I think that we really just kind of need to take a look at, overall in the bigger picture. Eventually COVID goes away. Eventually though, something else may come along, and how are we going to respond to that? Are we going to respond to the same way to that as we did this? Are we going to become numb to new viruses? How is the tolerance? Because everybody already is getting sick and tired of this whole thing. And so, I just wonder how we're going to handle the rest of this. But I think that we have to be able to have some semblance of I think we have to have some semblance of our normal life. And I think that getting back to a sense of normalcy is good. Do I think that we should treat what's going on right now as if nothing is going on and that it's a hoax and shouldn't be addressed? No, absolutely not. I think it should be understood. I think we should take reasonable precautions. If you can, wear a mask, especially if you're around people you don't know. Be respectful of others. And that's kind of what I was talking about earlier with the manners. If if somebody else around you is wearing a mask, just put the mask on and be polite. I think that's the way that we can always seem eye to eye. And when you leave that person, take your mask off if that's what you want to do. That's the way I see it. But I also think if I were an employer, I need to figure out how to keep my employees, working and not on this seamless, endless leave for something that we probably know is just a flu, or just like the flu. But yeah, it's just, I hope that we can finally get some common sense here. And I hope that we can start looking at this a little bit more pragmatically. Like this is going to pass. The human race is not going to die because of COVID-19. I don't believe that. I think that we're going to learn a whole lot of things about COVID-19 as the years go on, even after, this vaccine gets widely used. And do I think we should all get the vaccine if you can? This is where I'm just going to leave it up to your guys' personal choice. I think that's what it is. It's personal choice. I'm going to get the vaccine only because, I'm getting vaccinated for everything else while I'm going through kidney failure. And I think that we definitely need to be cognizant of people with pre-existing conditions. But if you're a healthy person and you typically don't get shots anyway, and let's say you've already had COVID-19, I don't know. And if you're not comfortable with it, I don't feel like you should be mandated to take it. But I think that if we can truly prove that there's no harm to this vaccine, no matter which of the three you take, then take it. If it's not going to do any harm, if we can prove that it's safe, we can prove that it's just like every other medication you take. It just works a certain way, but it doesn't hurt your body. It's not going to give you cancer later on in life. Then take it. I know I'm probably going to take it, whenever I can get a vaccine. Am I going to go crazy and start like calling every pharmacy just so I can get an appointment, and all that? No. I'm going to wait my turn. I'm going to wait until someone calls me. I'm going to wait till, my dialysis center says, "Hey, we got vaccines. You want one?" Sure. So, and if you're a little bit more, what's the word? If you're a little bit more engaged with it and you're really wanting to get a vaccine, I think you should, keep doing what you're doing. And you got to feel safe in your own skin. But I will also say this, and I know this show isn't a religious show, and I understand that, and I want to be respectful of everybody here. And thank you for people who are commenting. I'd look away, but I'm already getting late in the stream here, and I need to wrap it up. But what I want to tell you guys is that if you have faith in something more than science here on earth, if you have faith that there's a higher power and control, for me, that person is Jesus Christ. He is my Lord and Savior, and he has guided me through everything in life. And even if I should die from this earth, I know and I believe 100% that I've got an eternal place that I will live. And I'm going to feel sad for my wife for a little bit to have to go on without me. And I'd be sad if she left without me. But I believe, and I do believe, that God has a plan for every one of us. He will never give us more than we can handle. We should not lean on our own understanding. We should always seek his wisdom. That is always, always at my core value what I believe. And I hope that some of you have that peace as well. If you do not, either myself or reach out into your local church, I think you should absolutely engage with that, because knowing Christ is the most peaceful feeling you will have. It's the most peaceful feeling that you can ever have. Rest in him. Don't buy into the panic as best you can, because this is not the end of the world, folks. This $2 trillion that they're spending now isn't what's going to save us. This isn't what's going to magically make our lives better. And I said this, I think last week or the week before, that we are going to have to pay this money back. This isn't free money. This is not. In fact, this could actually hurt us more in the long run by spending all this money. And I'm not going to go into all that here, but I think that if we could all just kind of get this peaceful understanding that, hey, this isn't going to kill us all. And we're already making huge strides to get on with our lives and to get a cure. I think that that's where we're going to be able to finally have some comfort. And until, the news finds another thing to make us all panic about. But that's what I'm telling you, folks. Try not to buy into it all. And that's also what I hope the show does, is show you that there's moderate people out there who aren't on one side or the other. We have a sense of peace. There are people who can have peace in the midst of chaos. And for me, that is just my leaning on, my Lord and Savior. And I would share that with anybody. But also what I want to share here on the show is that having a middle of the road approach doesn't mean that you're wrong. Even though people on both sides of this may think that you're wrong, and you probably have a bigger uphill battle convincing anybody that you're right. And I just realized my stream froze. And let me see if I can switch. Oh, I think it's just my camera. Hang on a second. There we go. My camera, and this is a brand new camera too, but I'm glad I was able to get it working without having to close out of the stream and all that. And I'm sorry it killed the moment, didn't it? But no, that's kind of my point, is just try not to panic, folks. And being middle of the road doesn't mean you're bad. Being middle of the road doesn't mean that you're wrong, no matter what either side says. And I think that if we could try to think more like that and not get carried away in our own thoughts and just have a little trust and faith in some things that we can't control ourselves, like COVID-19 or any other virus that we should get afflicted with. We can take precautions, but we can't really control it. If we ever get it, it's going to do what it's going to do. We can take medications, but still, it's going to do what it's going to do. Anyway, that's all I got for you guys, folks, today. This video, it's about 10 minutes longer than what I really like to keep these shows at. So we're going to continue the conversation in the comments once this is over. So please feel free to, like I said, like and subscribe. I can't wait to see you guys next week. Hopefully I'll have a co-host with me, and we'll have a little bit more dynamics in the show too, a little more energy. I'm not always the funnest guy to listen to for 40 minutes, but I try. So I hope this brought you guys some peace and understanding today, that both sides, you don't have to be hard on one side or the other, and that there are things, if we look at a nation standpoint, and maps, I think, do a good job helping us to understand that we actually do see a lot more common ground on this than we think we do. All right. Take care, guys. God bless, and we'll see you next week on Between the Lines. I am John Lofton.